for our Seeds of Success networking series. We're going to get started in just a moment. For those of you who are not familiar with the Organic Farming Research Foundation, I'll give a little bit more of an introduction into the work that we do. But in the meantime, I'm just going to ask participants to pop into the chat and share a little bit more about yourself. So if you are a farmer or a researcher, just state your name, state that you're a farmer researcher, and then either what you grow or what your research areas are, so we can start getting to know one another within the chat. Also, I would like to ask folks to please mute themselves if you are not a presenter for today's event. I would really appreciate muting just so we don't have many distractions during our talks. Hi, everyone. I know that there's still a few more folks trickling in. I'm very excited to have our Seeds of Success event and have so many wonderful attendees with us today. Again, my name is Thelma Velez. I'm the Director of Research and Education Programs at the Organic Farming Research Foundation. And I am joined today with a bunch of OFRF staff, some staff from NIFA, and some wonderful farmers and researchers who are here to share more about their experiences in collaborating as teams for larger research grants. If you are just popping in, please do go into the chat, share a little bit more about yourself. I'm asking everyone to just type in your name. If you are a farmer or researcher, to share that information as well. And then if you are a farmer, share what you're growing, what are your systems, and if you're a researcher, what are your areas of interest? If you want to share your email, feel free to do that as well. Okay, I'm going to give it just a couple more seconds, and then I'm going to start with our presentation. Wonderful. Again, if you are not muted, please mute yourself so that we do not have distractions for the speakers who are going to be presenting today. Thank you all for coming to the Organic Farming Research Foundation Seeds of Success virtual networking series. We are going to be talking today about strategies for successful researcher and farmer collaborations. I just wanted to share a little bit about the staff that we have helping out. These are the staff that will be helping with our breakout rooms later today. Mary Hathaway has been the primary coordinator for this event, so a big thank you and shout out to Mary. We also have myself, the Director of Research and Education Programs, and then a couple other folks from the ARNI team, Jose, Heather, and Marina. We have Leah Lawson, who is our Partnerships and Development Director, Dominica, our Deputy Director, and then, of course, our Executive Director, our Fearless Leader, Breeze Tenser. Our agenda today is just to first start sharing an introduction about OFRF, our work, what the Seeds of Success series is meant to do. We'll have a short presentation from Matt Guaggio, who is with USDA NIFA, and then we'll have two farmer researcher presenters. So we'll have the first pair, which is KaZoua and Julie Grossman, and then Seth Kroeck and Eric Gallandt. And we'll have a short Q&A with the bigger group, and then the real fun part is going to be those breakout sessions where people can ask those questions directly to other researchers or farmers, and we'll have a report back. So I'm going to jump right in and give you a little bit of information about OFRF. Our mission is to foster the improvement and widespread adoption of organic farming systems. We really do that through research, education, and advocacy. Our goal is to make sure we're getting as much acreage into organic farming systems as possible, not just for the agricultural system, but for the people and the economic systems, and just to build a healthier, more resilient planet. So I'm going to dig into mostly the research and the education components. Just to give a little bit of, of a shout out, we do have a research grants program where we have university researchers and farmer researchers partnering for on-farm research. We are launching a new farmer-led trials program where farmers will be able to work more closely with one of our staff to help build or design a project on their farms. OFRF is also the PI and co-PI on a variety of government grants. We do serve as a partner across the US, so we have often been looped into other grants for different reasons. Sometimes it's outreach and dissemination, sometimes it's to help conduct the research as well. Something I do want to highlight for folks in the room, whether you're an organic or transitioning to organic farmer or researcher, is research we did with the National Organic Research Agenda. And this is a report. We did ask all certified organic growers across the nation what their biggest challenges and their needs were, what were their needs in terms of technical support, production, non-production challenges. We broke this data down by SARE region, whether they were beginning farmers or, you know, long-term farmers, are they BIPOC, you know, and this is really setting the stage for a lot of the work that's happening across the nation, not just internally for OFRF, but also many researchers have already expressed to me how important it is for them to understand what the gaps are. This research was funded by a NIFA OREI grant as well. And then we also focus a lot on grower education. So we love to take scientific research and distill it and make that information accessible to the farming and growing community. So we do that through a variety of outlets. We create guidebooks, we have fact sheets, we do videos, webinars. We also have a variety of online courses, some of which, for example, we have a feature on spotted wing Drosophila from a researcher that was funded through an OREI program grant. And we'd love to just take this information and share it with the broader public. Our communications reach is vast, which is why we really enjoy doing this work. We have over 180,000 followers across our social media channels. If you search organic farming and climate change, we are the #1 website that is ranked there. We do have a pretty vast newsletter subscription list. And we do reach lots of people when we're doing, our soil health guides or just having people come to our website. So we love to be able to take scientific research and create educational resources and share this with the broader community, and of course, partner with others on their research projects as well. So I did mention the Seeds of Success networking series. This is the first. We're really excited that this is the first, so please bear with us for anyone who has any issues logging on. We are troubleshooting and we're really excited that we'll be able to do this. The goal for this is to have a networking space for farmers and researchers to come together. Some will be focused more on researchers and farmers, some are farmer to farmer, but being able to have a space where people can talk about their challenges, their successes, and showcase that work. And so this is the first. And then another big piece of work that we've been doing is creating a centralized research content hub. We did hear from people in our National Organic Research Agenda that they want a centralized location for looking for scientific research on their challenges. And so we are really working to develop this and featuring a lot of the science that's happening across the nation for different growing systems. This particular project and this first Seeds of Success is funded in part through a cooperative agreement we have with USDA NIFA. We've been very privileged and honored to be working closely with NIFA to do a variety of things, one of which is program evaluation, so an analysis of their research that was funded through OREI and ORG grants. That will be a taking stock report that is underway. We've been helping to host their project directors meeting, again, outreach and dissemination of some of the findings, including researcher spotlights. Before I transition to the next slide, I did want to open up a quick poll. So Mary, if you could open up that first poll, and then this is really just to gauge, how many people have partnered with researchers or farmers for these projects. So have you ever collaborated with researchers or farmers for an on-farm research project? Please just take a moment to answer this quick question, and just to get a sense of who here is new to this and who's already pretty established when it comes to these types of collaborations. Again, for those of you who have just come in, please feel free to share some information about yourself in the chat. This is an opportunity for us to get to know one another and share more information, hopefully make some connections. And then Mary, if you could share, do we have an update on the poll numbers?
I'll go ahead and share the results. Looks like just about everybody got a chance to answer.
Fantastic. Right, so 52% have, 30% have not, and about 20% have been considering. So this is really exciting because I think this is a good space to talk about this. I'm going to transition to our next slide to give our NIFA speaker, Matt Guaggio, an opportunity to share more about the types of funding opportunities that exist for organic agricultural research. Matt, please let me know when you want me to advance the slides.
Okay, thank you, Thelma. Thank you, Mary. And also thanks to the entire team of OFRF. Thank you for inviting us and also for organizing these discussion sessions. Let's move to the next slide, which is really our non-discrimination statement. So we always start our presentation here at NIFA by letting everyone know that we do not discriminate in the offerings of our programs. And this also offers the process for someone to file a complaint if you feel like you have been discriminated in the offering of some of our programs. So this is our team here today. My name is Matt Guaggio. I'm a National Science Liaison, and my colleague, Steve Smith, who is also present with us today. He's a National Program Leader from the Animal Systems. And we have Catherine Bonner, who is our program specialist. So if you need to contact us for anything related to ORAI, that is the team. Next slide. Just the purpose of the program of ORAI is it seeks to solve critical organic agriculture issues, priorities, or problems through the integration of research, education, and extension. And ORAI is really the program where we want to work with those growers or solve the problems of growers who have already adopted the organic standards. So this is not like the organic transitions program where we are focusing on the transition. ORAI is more for those already operating as organic farmers. Next slide. Now, I know the discussion of today is on farmer-researcher collaboration. Why is that important to us? It is because the legislation that created ORAI program mentioned on-farm research as one of the 8 mandates of the program. And I have that, verbatim there on the screen. The people who created the program wanted to see us conduct advanced on-farm research. And next slide, what have we done with that mandate? Every year in our request for applications, which we call RFA, we have included on-farm research as a priority every year. And we have pretty much verbatim included what was in the legislation that created the program. The next slide, you see, why are we even interested in farmer-researcher collaboration? For us, is to address that mandate of on-farm research. And to do on-farm research, you need a full farmer-researcher collaboration. We need that to help establish project relevance to the need of the industry. That way we will not be asking ourselves, is this important to the industry or not? That will also make sure that research results are adopted immediately. And we know there are a lot of researchers that do not have certified facilities. That will offer them an opportunity also to work in certified facility. Next slide. So these are some of the, what we call some tips on how to develop proposal with farmers. We always advise people to include farmers' input at all phases of the project. Don't just wait until the end and ask for a letter of support from them. Also, add those farmers working with you as collaborators, as key personnel on the project. And if they do, they are in fact key personnel, compensate them for the use of their facilities, for their time, and for other involvement in the project. And most of the time, when our panel is reviewing a proposal, they always see it very positively when farmers' compensation is included in the budget narrative. Next slide. Okay, So there is a plenty of opportunity. You know that our budget increased to all the way to 50 million. And in 2023, this year, we offer project up to 3.5 million, ranging, from 50,000 for conference and planning to 3.5 million. So there is really no excuse for not including farmers as a part of your project and providing some compensation for them. We expect to have a program in 2024, which is next year, but everything is pending approval from Congress. Next slide. So I just wanted to also point out a couple of things that we do not fund. We do not provide funding to go and buy land or farm equipment or construction. We do not provide funding to go and do international activities unless they are important to U.S. agriculture or provide direct assistance to producers. Next. And finally, just a couple of links, because I know you will be receiving this PowerPoint, a link there for some upcoming events. And if you're looking for the next RFA, this is the link that you can consult regularly to see when it will be published. Next slide. And one more time, just our contact information. I am here today. My colleague Steve Smith is here today. If you have any question, we will be happy to address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt, for sharing all of that wonderful information. Just in case you haven't entered it, please do make sure you enter your information in the chat. That goes for Steve and Catherine as well. I'm really excited to move us into our first presentation from our farmer researcher pair, which is KaZoua Berry, which is a director of Big River Farm, and Julie Grossman, a professor at the University of Minnesota.
Great. And you, Thelma, thank you for that. You can just jump past this slide because you already had an introduction. And I want to start out by saying how excited I am to be presenting here with KaZoua. We have worked together with Big River Farms in my lab for almost 10 years now, and have done a wide variety of things that I think would be kind of characterized as on-farm research and outreach. My lab in particular focuses on ecological nutrient cycling and organic systems, and we prioritize trying to sneak legumes into our rotations on veg farms. And you see a lot of people in this slide because part of what I really emphasize in this lab is to train my graduate students and my undergraduates in conducting that sort of work and trying to make our work most relevant to the farmers that are going to use it. So having this relationship with farms like Big River Farms is really important both to my mission as an educator, but also to the research program. I'm going to hand it over right now to KaZoua, who can tell you a little bit about Big River Farms and how we got to know each other.
Thanks, Julie. My name is KaZoua Berry. I am the farm director at Big River Farms. We are a program of the food group, which we have a food bank in New Hope, Minnesota, and we service over 200 food shelf partners, and we also provide affordable grocery pop-up shops, and we also have the Twin Cities Mobile Market. And Big River Farms is located in Marine on St. Croix. And we
next slide too. Sorry about that, KaZoua.
Oh yeah.
There you go.
Thank you. And we have, so our farm is certified organic, and we lease land about 150, but then only 50 acres is for crop production, and the other acreage is for infrastructure. And the cool thing about our program is that we not only provide the land access piece, but we are an education training program. So we have two different aspects to our program, where one part is like very beginning, if you are an aspiring farmer or a food grower who you don't know how to grow food or have, tried growing your own food, but want to grow in a capacity of like commercial where you're selling it to people, then, you can start in our program. And if the idea is that in a few years, you'll be proficient and have the knowledge enough to be able to start your own business. And then we have our incubator portion where you are a farmer for many years, but you just need that infrastructure support to build your business. And so we have greenhouses, we have coolers, we have irrigation, we have staff support and tools and equipment for farmers to use in our program. And we also host the Emerging Farmers Conference, which is next week, Friday and Saturday. I can't believe it's already around the corner, but we have about 300 farmers across the country that comes to this conference, and we provide language interpretation support. So typically we do about 8 to 10 language live interpretation at the conference. And then in our program, we also provide that language access piece to our farmers too. We have many, many different farmers that have different cultural backgrounds as well as different languages. Next slide. So this is like just an aerial view of Big River Farms, where you see like all the plots that are kind of mapped out, and then farmers, they start with 1/8 of an acre up to 1 acre. So this people are kind of farming more intensively, and what we grow right now, we're dabbling into some perennial crop production. We're teaching farmers how to grow perennials because it's leased land, and many times farmers don't want to invest in perennial systems. So as an organization, we're able to do that for farmers, and they can learn how to grow and manage perennial systems without risking that they're going to be leaving in a few years and they've invested all that money and time into it. And they can also grow their annual crops as well. Next slide. Julie, I think this is you.
Well, I think now we were going to talk a little bit about why we're both interested in on-farm research. I know this was a project that KaZoua participated in on Big River Farms with another researcher here at the University of Minnesota. And so this happens a lot out there. From my perspective, the value of doing the work we do on Big River Farms is that we can expose the farmers that are farming out there on their individual plots to our research through their everyday work. So they might be out there tending their farms and they walk by our research project and they kind of eye it and wonder what it is. And it helps us to become more relevant and useful to the farmers. So the work we're doing is more readily adopted at the end of the day, or maybe not if it looks bad. I'd say that's one of the definite downsides of on-farm research is we're taking on risks that the farmers might not want to take on. And sometimes it is very risky and that it looks terrible. It might be very windy or, our plots don't look great, but that's part of the value. The next slide, please.
And just to reiterate, like Julie, you're right. And also one thing that is challenging is like a lot of our farmers are immigrant farmers. They don't have experience growing in the climate that we have. I saw that many of you are from out of town, which is awesome, but Minnesota, we have a really short growing season, and a lot of farmers are used to growing in tropical areas. We have farmers who've never grown in greenhouses before and don't understand the concept of transplanting and also nutrient management, the way that we do nutrient management at, here in order for us to increase crop production. And I think one of that is like allowing farmers to see what the different crops are we can grow here, and as well as understanding like what the risks are, because farmers are not willing and they can't always spend resources and time to try something, because time is so, like a lot of our farmers work full-time jobs and then they also farm. So if they are also farming, working full-time jobs and trying things out, I think that eats into a lot of time and resources that they don't have.
And KaZoua, if I were to ask you what some of the challenges have been in our collaboration, especially with doing replicated research trials on your farm, what would you say they were?
Well, research, as you know, is very, it can be like time consuming because there's certain specific criteria, right? There's specific asks that farmers have to keep track of, to record keep or to be able to tend their field and plot in a certain way where it's not always practical. It's not always translated in a practical way for farming. So what the needs of researchers are is not always the same needs as what farmers are needing for them for crop production. And so the challenge is, that time management piece. And also because just the natural challenges of climate, right? Like you can plan your farm and you can try to do these trial plots and manage them the best as you can. But because of the extremes of how hot it has been in the different periods of droughts, you know, that really affects the farmer's ability to be able to take care of certain areas. And one example is like we did a lettuce plot at Big River Farms, and we got hit with drought really early that year, like in May. And the lettuce was already starting to grow, and they needed my team to go out and water it. But because the pressure from the well was low, that we had to spend a lot of time managing that area just so that we can get appropriate watering, because, you know, we weren't getting all the pressure to go through one line. And then my team had to like take the line and cover one area for an hour and then move it the next hour and so on to make sure all that crop is taken care of. So those are some of the challenges that it can happen in terms of the research collaboration.
Yeah, and that, I guess, from my end of things, the flip side of that is, I was talking to KaZoua about this the other day, the guilt of asking, like, hey, can you go out and move these irrigation lines from plot to plot for different points in the day so that we actually get the plots watered in the way we need them to be watered. And so that the communication is difficult during the growing season anyway, because of their actively farming, and we're thinking about the project. So I know that could be a barrier sometimes to wanting to engage in research. Next slide, please. You know, I mentioned one of the main reasons I engage in this research is to bring our research to life for farmers. And being at Big River Farms has been awesome because of the number of farmers that are working out there, and we can have our plots and get input from the farmers about what we're doing, what they like, what they don't like, sort of informally. You know, we can have field days, formal field days like you see here, but we can also find out from them, or I could ask KaZoua, so what do they think about this plot? You know, do they have a favorite species that they've seen grow? And so that articulation of our project to the farmers happens every day, not just in a snapshot of a field day for a couple of hours. We do that too, but you know, it's just a much more informal interaction, which we really like. Next slide, please. So to get down to some of the nitty gritty about the most recent project we've had out there, we were really interested in integrating what we would call the summer cover crops into a vegetable system. So we here in Minnesota, as you might guess, have a very short growing season, which means for farmers wanting to integrate legume cover crops into their system, this can be tricky. So in a nutshell, what we did was develop two systems where we had cash crops and cover crops grown in rotation with each other. You can see the species listed here. If anybody's interested in finding out more about the project, they can write to me and I'd be happy to send information. But this required that we had two different systems in operation at the same time. This cover crop followed by a cash crop, and then a cash crop followed by a cover crop, where the cash crop was a cool season vegetable crop like lettuce or broccoli. Next slide, please. This is what the project looked like in action out in the field. You can see our cover crop plots, which is what I'm crouching in right now. And then in the background, you can see the cash crop. And this was front and center at Big River Farms. So KaZoua and I were talking the other day about what, you know, that the farmers didn't really at first ask much about it, like what this plot was. They knew it was something unusual from what they'd seen. But then later on down the road, we had a field day. I think it might be coming up. Yeah, next slide, please. A field day in which we explained what was there. And then, KaZoua, do you want to talk about what happened with the farmers and their interest after that event?
Yeah, so one thing that I've instilled at Big River Farm is to do 50% cover crop at all times throughout the season, just to emphasize the importance of organic matter. And many times when we're talking about that, farmers don't know what cover cropping is. They're like, why would I want to replace my cash crop for cover crop, you know, especially if they don't have a lot of land, and I'm not going to be able to sell cover crops. So why is this important? And so when we had this field day, it was really cool because we did a field walk, and farmers were walking by and they were like, oh, so this is what cover cropping is for. You know, they were interested in like learning more about how they can apply it. And they were interested. It was cool because we were able to develop more of that closer one-to-one type of support for farmers, where they can ask questions more freely. And then farmers outside, so after this field day, you know, farmers reached back out and they were like, well, how do we do it in our field? And how can we strategize so that we can have cover crop and still be able to make a profit, or, you know, continue their farming practices without cover cropping taking out the whole season. Because the cool thing about this plot was that like it wasn't the whole field wasn't out of commission for the whole year. Like there was portions of it where there was cash crop and then cover crop, and then we, you know, we switched the plots. And so it was a really good visual for farmers, even though they've driven past this plot probably hundreds of times, but they never like got the opportunity to ask about it.
And I guess one of the final things I would say is something Matt mentioned earlier is the importance of compensation for the farmers. As I started with today, we're taking on a risk by experimenting with something that they would like to see, like these summer cover crops that were mentioned earlier that we were using in our plots, these warm season legumes. This project was suggested by the farmers that stand to benefit if we're successful. And so that idea came straight from the farmers. And then when we developed the proposal for funding of the work, we developed it in collaboration with the farmers, and they were able to select the cover crops that they wanted to see on the plots. And so they had a very important role throughout the project development and in supporting the project while it was on the ground. But we really feel strongly about those farmers being supported financially for their time. And in this case, the farmers are Big River farms in general, being supported for the time and the effort and the land that we're using on the farm to conduct this work. So that's a really vital part for each of you that are thinking about doing this, of anything you might develop with farmers. Next slide. And I think we just have two more after this. Because you already mentioned the Emerging Farmers Conference. This is a really great event, and every year our lab is involved in some way. So it's kind of a spin-off of how our involvement with Big River Farms has been a research engagement, but it's also been a way that we can work with farmers and present our work to farmers through this conference. And that's resulted in other projects and other grants that we've been working on together. For example, one we're doing now is based on interpretation of soil test reports and some of our research results in soil science to farmers, specifically these farmers at Big River Farms, using approaches that are the ones they want to have used, not lecture, but mostly one-on-one talks. We're developing a soil nutrient plan, and we're just now in the process of rolling this out. And because of our nice collaboration with Big River Farms, we're able to do this with their farmers pretty seamlessly. I think we just have one more slide that, because you're going to say something else about our collaboration and what you've gotten from it.
Yeah, so there's a lot of added benefits to collaborating with researchers, because then we, as a farm, so with instilling the 50% cover crop rule, as a program, we're able to take what we've learned from Julie's team to make sure that we are like, if there are certain areas and we're reading the soil report that has more phosphorus, there's certain cover crops that we'll use in that area, and we're not just doing like a one size fits all, because even though that's easier to do, that's not always effective. And then we'll be able to work with, we've been able to work with farmers. And so one thing that has developed for us is the soil health plan, Julie, that we're working with farmers. And this year we have started doing that with individual farmers, especially the farmers who have advanced into like the independent status where they can start managing their fields on their own. And also like the ability to use certain tools. One of the field days that when you think about cover crop, many people get intimidated because they think about using big tools or the no-drill seeder, right? But then Adria, they demonstrated that you didn't need to use that. You can use a scythe. There's other ways to terminate cover crops, or there are effective and affordable ways for you to instill certain practices. And so it's not just about the soil health and the nutrient nature of the trials and the research, but also the exposure to certain tools and techniques and methods. Like that has been really helpful for us to be able to, as a program team. So we are mediators for the researchers, and then we work with the farmers. So we're taking what Julie's team has given us, and then we are kind of translating and interpreting that to help farmers be able to like apply it in a practical way. Because like I said before, it's not always practical, that information, not the forefront, but then what we can do is be able to utilize that information and translate it in the way, not just in a different language, but I'm talking about simplified English, so that people can understand and how to use the different methods.
And we'll stop there, but we're happy to take any questions after the other group goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Give me 1 second. Just want to make sure I'm sharing this. Thank you, Julie and KaZoua, so much for sharing your insights. I do want to just be cognizant of time and hand it off to our next presenters, Dr. Eric Gallandt and Seth Kroeck of Crystal Spring Farm. The floor is now yours. Again, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat. I do see a couple questions rolling in. We'll get to those after this presentation.
Great, you can go to, there we go. So I'm going to talk a little bit about a project that is just recently finished up, where we were doing quite a bit of on-farm research. So an ORI grant, a collaboration with Dan Brainerd at Michigan State. You can go to the next slide. But really, this story of this grant started back in 2008 and 2009 with a SARE grant I got. After a sabbatical in Denmark, I learned about that red machine that you see right there. It's made by a farmer in Finland. It's called the Weedmaster, and I'd never seen anything like it. And I just thought, oh my gosh, the farmers that I work with, they have to see this. So I wrote a SARE grant, got one, and the idea was that we would take it around, and each participating farmer would have it for a few weeks. And this particular image is very cool because we had sort of a contest in this field. So 2 of the farmers' standard practices versus the innovative practice. And we had such fun. And we made a YouTube video. You can go to Zero Seed Rain. It's got like 1 million views. Very fun. But then I'd come back in 3 weeks and I'd say, Mark, what do you think about the Weedmaster? And it's still sitting behind the barn. He hadn't touched it since we made the cool video. And we got 1 million views on the video, but nobody ever adopted this thing or bought one. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, anyway, next slide. So we took it out to farms. It was very cool, but I thought, okay, next time I do something like this, I've learned a lot about how to do on-farm research. So Dan and I wanted to test the idea of getting organic vegetable farmers to combine proven seed bank management strategies with some innovative physical weed control tools. So next slide. So as part of this, we had a bunch of other stuff I won't talk about, but on-farm research, both in Michigan or the Midwest and in Maine, was going to be very important. Next slide. And one of the things that I thought, and I just loved writing this part of the proposal, I was like, oh, I know. We're gonna give each farmer each year a $2,900 stipend to pay for an on-farm intern. The interns we'll network the interns, so they're talking with each other. The intern, because it's going to be one of the farm employees, is going to engage the people on the farm with the research, and the interns would help facilitate collecting really good data. And oh my gosh, it was just a wonderful section of that proposal. And actually the first year it worked pretty well, and then COVID, and then it worked a little bit less well. But this, I think, is still a good idea. So next slide. So so basically some farms would pay an existing employee to do this. Other farms hired maybe one of my students and so on. And then this was the other part of the project that I thought was going to be so great for farmers is data-driven decision-making. So the on-farm research interns would collect data. So the farmers are basically comparing whatever their normal weed control system or tools are with something new that we help them test. And then the interns would put the data into this really slick website that we paid a lot of money for. Next slide. And then the idea was that, all the participating farmers, they're going to be so eager to see the data that they're going to log in, and they're going to see in real time the data from their farm and compare it to other farms and blah, blah, blah. And it turns out that the farmers didn't really want to look at the data. That Dan and I, and then our students were probably the only clicks on this darn expensive website. And the farmers would look at the tools in the field and go like, yeah, that's working great. No, that's not working very great. So this, I really thought this was a great idea. And it turns out that no, I'm not ever going to try this again. But next slide. So data-driven decision maker, that didn't work. The hands-on tool testing, absolutely amazing. So the farmers, I would spend a lot of time on the farms because actually a lot of my students could do certain things, but they just didn't know enough about adjusting tools and helping farmers. I mean, it was a lot of wrenching and then going to the farmer shop and welding stuff or whatever. And the farmers loved doing this. Next slide, got a couple of examples of this. So basically the farmers would compare what they were normally doing to something new, and probably say 2/3 of the 18 farms that I worked with adopted something new based on this. Maybe a third tested something that they really wanted to buy and they were really glad they didn't buy it. So I guess I filed that one under success as well. Here's one more slide. Next slide, please. And this is a great shot of Pete Johnson. He's like, I have 60 acres of organic vegetables, and he ran that Japanese weirder tool all the way to the end of that field and back. He was just so psyched about watching that thing control weeds. And he clearly just did not need me to go and count the weeds before or after, or have one of his employees do that to be convinced that he wanted that tool. He actually took it, put it on his tractor. I went to pick it up a month later and I said, Pete, where's the Japanese weeder tool? He said, oh, it's gone. I'm like, what do you mean gone? He's like, well, we wore it out. We had to keep lowering it. So anyway, another good testimonial. Next slide. So the interns I think it's still good because it's a way to engage the farms. And I think, if we're going to ask farms to collect data, it's only, we should help support that. But it didn't really help to engage the farmers in most cases like I thought it would. And in this picture, you see in the foreground, that's the research intern here at Piecemeal Farm. But notice behind the pickup truck, that's the entire rest of the farm crew. So, it just didn't work. When it came time to get a job done on the farm, the research intern had to go with the whole crew on the farm, and that was just it. The other thing that made some of this challenging, I'll just comment on, was that, sometimes when I'm working with farmers in November and December, planning something for next year, it all sounds really great. And then in June of next year, after 4 weeks of solid rain, and they're only able to get half of the employees they thought, then not so good. So a lot of stuff ends up happening, but the data-driven decision-making, not so much, but the hands-on tool testing, that is a total win. So next slide, and then I'll turn it over to Seth. So Seth was one of our participating farmers, and this is a field day we had at his farm. And yeah, go ahead, Seth, take it away.
You need to unmute, Seth.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Hi, everybody. So I've worked with Eric a couple of different times, including this last project, and I've done a lot of research work with other researchers at Orno and Maine Farmland Trust and American Farmland Trust. So I've been involved in a few different research projects and also work with Cooperative Extension a lot. And so have a familiarity of kind of interfacing with folks who have an academic viewpoint. And I think my experience is that there's just been a huge range of success in the projects, and a lot of that has to do with the perspective of the researcher coming in. And it's something everybody knows, but I think you really need to state that farmers work a lot, and they don't have a lot of time or mental space to throw at different things. And so the way to really get them engaged is to excite them in kind of three different realms I put together. So the first, and I think it's the most important one, is to really reach out and engage as many different farmers as you can when you're starting to really think about your hypothesis. So before you're writing your grant and really working out the details, the onus should really be on the researcher to go out and find farmers and talk to them about their idea. Go out to their farms. How are they dealing with this problem that you're, as a researcher, are thinking about? Do they find it exciting? Do they go, nah, that's not really consequential? Or do they say, well, yeah, that part's exciting, but this is kind of what we're doing, and maybe you could think about this. Engage a lot of different farmers in your viewpoint. I think central to organic, especially, I've been a certified grower for 25 years. Organic is really about improving what you do year after year after year. And so organic farmers are really process oriented. And so if you can excite them on that level about how they can improve what they're doing, make their farms more productive, reduce the labor or the time that they're spending on doing something, really thinking about it from that angle, I think is really important to engaging them. The second point is really basic, which, I call it kind of toys and candy. And Eric is really good at this. You can see all of the different pieces of equipment that he brought to my place. I mean, this is the middle of the summer, and to get a bunch of farmers from all over Maine to come and look at equipment in the middle of the summer when they have a lot to do, it's very enticing when there's something on hand. It's less so when you're talking about, as Eric said, data and things that make academic research interesting is maybe less interesting to farmers. And so having a hands-on aspect to your presentation, having a specific nuts and bolts, how does this research actually physically affect a specific farm? What's that example? How do they quantify that? And really kind of bringing farmers in on that practical loop to the research that you're doing. And then I'll just reiterate that farmers really like to be paid for their time and for their expertise. And so really building that into your budget is really important. And the flip side of that from your standpoint is that when you write somebody a check at the beginning of the season, they're going to feel that much more obligated to really jump through the hoops and help you meet the benchmarks that you need to be met over the course of the summer. The other great thing, which I think maybe gets missed a lot, is that when farmers get together for one of these meetings where you're talking about the research and you're talking about results, it's really important to leave some time for the farmers to have some conversations. And so maybe start it out with a conversation where you're talking about the research, but having, pizza or, Eric had a barbecue at one of his things, time where the farmers can just kind of have a conversation that's maybe going to drift away from the research is really important. We're really busy. We don't have a lot of time to see each other, and we really like to talk about the nuts and bolts. And I'd say the benefit from the research standpoint of that kind of a time is that the researchers should really focus on trying to be a fly on the wall. What are the farmers talking about? What's important to them? Maybe you came there to talk about cover crops, but they're really, the conversation quickly moves on to a new technique for irrigation, and oh, this farmer's doing it, and it's really affordable, and where did you get your equipment, and who's supplying the best thing, and follow those conversations that the farmers are going to have. And while it may not inform directly that research project that you're working on, I think it's the potential can lead you to your next research project, and the farmer, that the farmers are already engaged because they're already talking about it. And so it's a simple way to kind of follow the farmers' interests to loop them back into the subject that you're working on.
Thank you, Seth and Eric. Is there anything else you wanted to add before we transition to a quick Q&A and then breakout rooms?
No, I think I'm good.
All set.
Perfect. I didn't go through these because I wasn't sure, so I'm just going to
Yeah, that's okay.
slide through them. So in the interest of time, I'm only going to take a couple of questions from the broader group, and then we'll transition into breakout rooms that Mary has been setting up while we've been going through our presentation. So one of the questions that came up, this is specifically for KaZoua and Julie, is whether the farm is mostly educational or if it does depend at all on crop development. And I think you did mention that at least half of it is for production. And how does research collaboration impact revenue generating activities?
I think I'll let KaZoua handle those since they're connected to the farm.
So thankfully, Big River Farms is a program, and so we have the ability to offset a certain portion of our space to research. But I also participated in some research as a farmer, and so you do need to consider that, like, for the research and what the purpose is. And for example, we did a peanut trial, and I knew that if we're going to do peanut trials studying the the nitrogen fixating legumes or nodules, then for sure the following year, like, I'm already planning what I'm going to be planting, which we ended up planting garlic in those in that area. And about, I would say, 1/8 of my area was taken out of commission for that year for the peanut. But the good news is that the peanuts were really yummy. We were able to still consume the peanuts, and it was a cool way to show other farmers that you can grow peanuts in the area we are in, even though we had a short climate. Another thing that you do need to consider is that there are some language, so it depends on the language that you do need to ask, like, the researcher when you buy the seed, is if you're able to, for example, I didn't ask if I can use the peanuts, if I could sell those peanuts at my market. I wasn't interested in selling it because it wasn't like a whole big plot, and I was excited that my family, my children, can consume it. But I think in the future, if you're going to do cover crop or anything that has to do with growing, like, there are some opportunities where we did like a cabbage one where farmers were able to sell their cabbage after the research. And I'm in a garlic research right now. And we were able to sell our garlic. So I think you just have to make sure that the agreements are clear in what you are researching, and to make sure like the timelines make sense for your markets.
And we also had set that up for our the broccoli and the lettuce that we produced as part of our on-farm experiment was intended to be marketed, but I can't remember what happened, because in the end of the day, it wasn't.
No, we donated it to the food bank because of the timing of when the harvest was so big, and I think we had to you guys ended up harvesting it a little bit earlier because of the heat, like, was causing the lettuce to bolt. And
That's
so
right.
we ended up harvesting it. And then after the researchers did their thing with weighing, then we donated to the food bank. So the food wasn't going to waste for sure. So you got to also be mindful, like your capacity, if you're able to tend to that and how you can move that food product so that it doesn't go to waste if you are utilizing your land and space for that.
Thank you. Another question that came up even just before registration began was, what recommendations or insights do you have for establishing these types of collaborations and setting up a realistic research plan that involves both the farmer and the researcher? Eric, I'm gonna tap on you first.
I mean, for me, it's been, I've just always tried to spend as much time visiting and hanging out on farms like Seth suggested. So, you know, and if I get a new graduate student, we'll go to a farm and just, you know, get a brief tour and then hang out and hand weed carrots for a couple of hours. And that's when, you know, if you're weeding carrots next to the farmer, you can talk to them about whatever you want for as long as you want. And you start to get a sense of, you know, where are some of your interests related to the things that they're talking about. And so it's just time. I don't think you can just send out an email to a bunch of farmers and say, I want to do this researching, but I don't know, at least for me, it's, you got to spend the hours on the farms and develop those relationships, at least for me, to know that I'm confident I'm working on a problem that fits their systems.
Yeah, and I think that that concept of relationship that you mentioned, Eric, is so important in figuring out which farm might be the one that will support you in what you want to do as a researcher and that is excited about your work. Because the research project is just one thing that very much can meld into other work in the future, as we mentioned in our presentation. And the more you work together, the more you understand about those challenges that are particular to that farm and helping figure out mechanisms through the funding that will allow you to meet those challenges with your research or your outreach. And so for us, like the research and the outreach are very close and tied together. You can't really separate them.
Thank you, both of you. And I guess a follow-up for that is just really thinking about how to make these relationships not just transactional. And so I'm hearing researchers are connecting with the farmers, but have you had farmers reach out to you and have you followed up on those? I did have a question where someone asked, you know, how do you attract, you know, research interests in something that perhaps might not be very publishable for a researcher, right? How do you find questions that are relevant for both, but do farmers often come to you wanting to be included in projects, or are you often seeing the researchers are going to the farmers?
I mean, I ended up with probably half of the farmers that were in this last project end up coming to me, or the farm that we were working on said, oh, hey, you need to go talk to Everett. Everett was by and he thinks this is really cool. Or so it was basically the farmers' neighbors and their friends networking that helped to grow it, which I think is just great, because then you all, they're actually sharing equipment on their own that I don't even know about. So they're taking some of my stuff and, you know, oh, I wanted to test that. Can we bring it over to the farm? And anyway, just, you know that they're talking about the stuff a lot more among themselves when you're not even there. So
yeah, we just had a new OREI funded, thank you, Matt, that will be disseminating some cover crop species that we've been working with in high tunnels to farmers in Minnesota, in the north central region of the US and in the Northeast. And we're trying a new approach in that on-farm research, where instead of having a replicated trial on a farm, we're basically giving 1 or 2 replicates of different species to a whole bunch of farmers in sort of a mother and baby design, and seeing how they like it. And we've been done other projects like this, and that's been really successful, because then they can you know, talk amongst themselves and compare, like, how, you know, I had Austrian winter pea, how did yours do? Oh, mine looked bad. Oh, mine looked bad too. You know, it's like that creates that community around the research that doesn't really need us to be there except as researchers, except as consultants. And so we're excited to see how that will go in terms of the cover crop and high tunnel work.
I'd also add that you know, these kind of projects where farmers are looped in, and you do create a relationship from spending that time with them. You know, farmers don't always see an easy way into the academic angle of doing things, and so you know, I might have a problem on my farm that doesn't directly relate to the research that I'm doing with Eric, but I'm going to use him as a resource to reach out because he knows who's doing entomology, who's doing small grains research. And it reinforces the relationship, and it comes to a self-fulfilling prophecy because, you know, it just creates that conversation. And then, oh, I run into Eric at a seminar or a winter conference, and we continue the conversation, and the relationship just builds, and we keep meeting. You know, I meet other academics that he knows, and I introduce him to other farmers that we know. And so, you know, it is a lot of effort, I think, to build those relationships, but then they keep going and exponentially growing over time.